Hey, everybody. Legal Vices here, welcoming you to the spoiler filled, unprofessional, unedited, one take review of episode 2 of Netflix's 1899, a semi sort of maritime related thriller series, I guess we call it. We did our episode 1 review. Now we're doing episode 2 called The Boy. I've got my notes here. So again, this is unedited, unprofessional, and just a one take review, totally spoiler filled. So if you haven't watched it and you don't want to have the spoilers mentioned, go watch it, then come back. All right, so it starts out at where episode 1 left off. The captain wakes up. He's in a forest. He calls out for Nina, who apparently is his daughter, as it turns out. Then he looks out and he sees a house, and in one of the windows there's a woman and a child. And then the house catches on fire, and then he wakes up again. And then he gets a message from the company that owns. He's on the vessel, the Kerberos. He gets a message from the owner's company saying to sink the Prometheus, which they found. If you go watch the episode 1 review, if you have no idea who what the Prometheus is, but the company orders him to sink the Prometheus, and also he's alerted to the fact that all of the compasses on the ship are currently going crazy. They're all just spinning randomly, and then it cuts to Mara, and the boy that they found at the end of episode 1 is sleeping on the bed. Mara starts looking through his clothing. She finds a gold ring, and then she puts it back. She walks out of the room, and the boy opens his eyes. He was just faking, pretending to be asleep. So we don't know what's up with this boy yet. He's just kind of acted weird. He hasn't spoken a word, and he's starting to be a little creeper, kind of faking being asleep and whatnot. And no one on board the Prometheus except the boy survived. And also when they checked when they explored the Prometheus, they found nobody else on the ship. There was over 1,000 passengers, and only the boy was there, and he was in perfect health, hiding. Well, he was locked in a cupboard, actually. Then it cuts to the Dutch people. There's some Dutch people down in steerage, down in the lower class section of the ship. They're just praying. So apparently they're part of some religious organization. It cuts back to Mara. She goes back to her cabin. And at the end of episode 1, there was a guy that climbed up over the side of the ship from the water, fully clothed, soaked in water, and it was his silhouette. He released a little green bug under the door and went into a cabin 2 doors down from the main character, Mara. So Mara goes back to her cabin, and this guy that climbed up out of the ocean, he is waiting, trying to get into her room. She catches him trying to break into her room. He says his name is Daniel Solace, and he's there because he heard noises coming from her room, which we don't believe because the boy hasn't made any noises. Marin says that he looks familiar. He says, have I ever seen you before? And he says, I doubt it. But earlier he said, my name is Daniel Solace. I'm your neighbor. So he's her something, but he didn't want to say it. So we don't know what that's all about. So he kind of says he's something to her, but he stops himself. And Mara asks if they're related because he looks familiar, and he denies it. So there's some shady business going on between this Daniel Solace and Mara, the main character. But then it cuts back to the religious community, Dutch people. And as I mentioned during last episode's review, there's 2 Spanish brothers, and one of the Spanish brothers, he offers one of the Dutch guys in steerage a cigarette through a gate, and there's kind of a little gay, cheek touching thing going on. But in this episode, in episode 2, the Spaniard guy, he goes back into the Dutch community, and he meets up with the guy that he gave the cigarette to, and he gives him a silver cigarette box. And there's a little bit more gayness going on. He slowly slips the silver cigarette box into his pant leg, and his hand lingers there a little bit longer. And then it cuts to the master of the vessel, the captain. the captain starts speculating. He's processing things. The Kerberos, which is the vessel we're on for this show, the Kerberos was recently sold to an English company. Apparently, he's wondering why half of the crew was fired, but only the German crew was retained. And the cabins aren't full, so there's less than full occupancy on board the ship, and they're sailing in waters where they can't make a profit. There's no trade routes along the waters they're sailing in, so he's wondering why they're doing that. And he notices that the passenger ratio, the sailing routes are similar to the Prometheus, and he's wondering why the company is asking him to sink a perfectly good ship. So the master's starting to the captain, they call them masters also. The captain of the ship is wondering why these things are going on. And then one of the passengers, she's kind of this dark and mysterious busybody woman named Mrs. Wilson. She talks to this French guy. If you watched again episode 1, there's a French guy there and his wife. They're on their honeymoon. The French guy seems to be impotent because she was trying to get it on with his wife. It wasn't working out. He blames her for, just laying there like a starfish. But this mysterious Mrs. Wilson is talking to him, and he says, "Oh, you have your dalliances, you have your interests." And the French guy seems to have kind of a Japanese fetish, because there's there's a Chinese mother and her daughter who are faking to be Japanese, but he kind of seems to have an interest in the Japanese deal. So apparently he's not interested in his white newlywed kind of hot wife, but he's interested in this Chinese woman pretending to be Japanese. So maybe he has a little bit of Japanese fetish, or yellow fever as it's called over here in Asia. Then it cuts to a black crewman. This black crewman gets a note to go to cabin 2101. He goes there, and it turns out it's the cabin of this unsatisfied French woman who's on her honeymoon with her French husband. He goes into the cabin. She comes in. He hides under the bed. She unbuckles her boots, and then she walks back out of the cabin. And as soon as she leaves, he makes a dash for it and runs out. Then it cuts back to the captain. The captain's hesitating what to do. He got the orders to sink the ship, but he clearly doesn't want to. Then he flashes back to the fact that someone mentions that his wife set herself and her children on fire, which explains the dream at the beginning of the episode where his wife and another child were standing in a window in flames. So apparently his wife went nuts or something and set herself and the kids on fire and killed them. But then the captain hears singing out in the hall. And so he walks down the hall trying to find the source of this singing he's hearing, but there's nobody there. And then he sees his wife, or he sees this Nina person. He sees a woman walk across the hall and says, "Nina," and he runs after her, but there's nobody there. He follows the singing down, and he opens up a cabin door, and in it there's a woman and 3 girls sitting around this fireplace. Apparently that's his dead family that's there in this ship. And he confronts them. And as he's hugging his daughter, she bursts into flames and it knocks him back against the wall, and she disappears. And then he sees in the ashes where his daughter was standing a bug. And if you remember, as I said, that was this guy that crawled out of the ocean, this Daniel Solis. He released this little bug at the end of the first episode. Well, apparently this other little bug is in the fireplace where the captain saw his daughter burst into flames and disappear. So he follows this bug through the fireplace up this crawl space, which eventually leads back to his own cabin. So that's kind of weird what that was all about. And then when he gets into his own cabin, he looks down at the hatch door he opened, and he sees a triangle pattern. It's a triangle with a line bisecting it. And he notices that with some curiosity. Remember this triangle with a line through it. It keeps cropping up. And then it cuts back to Marin, the doctor, and she's talking to the young boy. And as she's talking to him, trying to get him to talk, she looks and she notices there's a tattoo behind his ear. And it's a tattoo of a triangle with a line bisecting it, exactly like was on the trap door in the captain's office. And When she sees this tattoo, the boy looks at her and just goes, puts his fingers in front of his lips like a hushing motion. And then it cuts back to the captain, to the master of the vessel, who we learn his name is Ike, apparently. He barges in and he grabs the boy and attacks him. He's like, what happened on the Prometheus? What's went on in that ship? I have to know what went on in the ship. And Mara pulls him off the boy and pushes him out into the hallway. And as they're standing there in the hallway, this other mysterious guy, Daniel Solis, who climbed up over the ship out of the ocean, he comes back. And just as Mara is shutting the door, he makes eye contact with his kid, and there's kind of this quiet tension between them. Then it cuts back to that black crewman who was talking to the French lady. And while they're talking, I noticed that she has earrings that are triangles with a line bisecting through them. So again, this triangle with a line bisecting, it shows up here. So he is talking to this French woman who is on this honeymoon with her impotent boyfriend, and there's a little bit of sexual tension building up between this black crewman and this French woman. He says his name is Clarence. She says her name is Clarice. His name is Jerome. And then she asks if they've met before, which is exactly what Mara asked Daniel Solis when she found him trying to get into her room. And then as he's going back to do his thing, Jerome gets attacked by other crew members. And as it turns out, he's not really a crew member. He's stolen a crew member's uniform. He's a stowaway. And his arc sort of ends with a, do you know what we do to stowaways on board this vessel? And we don't see him for the rest of the episode. But then it cuts back to Captain Ike. He wants to know, he asks a random crew member, how much coal do we have left on this ship? Go find out how much coal we have left. And it turns out the answer is they have 3,000 tons of coal. That comes into play a little bit later. Then it comes back to Mara. She's talking to this little boy. Again, she's trying to get him to talk. She mentions that her brother disappeared about 4 months ago. She believed he's on the Prometheus, which is this vessel that they found floating just off the side of the vessel. He mentions that she doesn't think he's dead because she got this letter. We saw a letter in episode 1. The letter was on this letterhead, and it said something along the lines of, meet me in New York and trust no one. So she tells the boy, I don't think he's dead. I think he was on the Prometheus. What can you tell me about what's going on the Prometheus? And then she shuts the envelope. She shows him the envelope. And on the back of the envelope is a triangle bisected by a line, which is this theme that keeps cropping up. But the boy doesn't answer anything. And then it cuts to the captain saying, get everybody into the dining room. Tell everyone to meet in the dining room so I can talk to them. And then it goes back to these Spanish guys. The one Spanish guy that was being a little bit gay with the Danish boy that was down in the hold. The backstory, if you didn't see episode 1, is the Spanish guys, they're brothers. One of them is faking being a priest, and the other is just sort of being there. But they get in this discussion, these two Spanish guys, these two Spanish brothers. The one is the fake priest. The other guy is the guy that was kind of being gay for the Dutch guy. But then it turns out that the priest is not only a fake priest, he's not really the guy's brother. And then in the next sentence, it's revealed he's not even Spanish. So he's not a priest. He's not the guy's brother. He's Spanish. Well, who is he? It turns out he's a Portuguese servant of the guy. And also they were gay lovers. And then some passionate man kissing ensues. And then we go back. It cuts back to Daniel Solis, the guy that crawled up onto the ship out of the water. He walks out of his cabin and he puts another of these green bugs on the floor, and it walks off. And this little girl, this little Dutch girl, apparently she sees this green bug on the floor and she decides to follow the bug. She follows the bug up onto the deck of the ship. And while she's on the top of the deck, following this little green bug, she sees some boots. She looks up and it's Daniel Solis. And he just looks at her and says, I'm so sorry. And then it cuts away. And then the captain announces to the people in the dining room that the Kerberos is going to tow the Prometheus back to England. They're going to turn around. They were originally supposed to go to America, but he said they're going to turn around. They're going to tow the Prometheus back to England because it's shorter to go back to England than it is to go to America, and they don't have enough coal reserves to tow the Prometheus to America. And so all 1,100 and some passengers on ship revolt against that idea. They don't want to go back to England. They want to go to America. But the captain takes off, and then Mara, again, she's one of the main characters. She follows the master onto the bridge. Onto the deck, and that's when the captain shows this envelope that he apparently got from somebody related to his family, and it's the same kind of envelope that she received from her brother. So there's something going on with these envelopes as well. And then again, it cuts back to her cabin. She's going back to her cabin, and this strange, mysterious Daniel Solace is waiting outside of her cabin. And he says that he disagrees with what the captain is doing. He disagrees with going back to England. And it was a short scene. It just shows there's more interaction between this Daniel Solace character and Mara. Then it cuts back to the crew. The crew are talking about the captain's indecision, and they start thinking, maybe we should just go ahead and sink the Prometheus with or without the captain's orders. But while they're doing that, they agree to kind of break up and discuss it later. And as soon as they break up, one of the crewmen finds the body of the Dutch girl that was apparently killed by Daniel Solace when he said, "I'm so sorry." So he finds the body and alerts the captain that this body's there. And at that point, the captain goes on deck. There's this little montage, and the song Child in Time by Deep Purple starts playing during this montage. And oh, by the way, back when Daniel Solace released this bug for the little Dutch girl to follow, there was a close-up of the carpet where he put this bug down, and the carpet was emblazoned with patterns of the triangle bisected by a line. And so again, at the end, Deep Purple's Child in Time starts playing as they go through this montage. Then it cuts to the bridge, and the telegraph machine on the bridge is suddenly spitting out a code that is maybe some sort of Morse code or something, but it's just a series of triangles. 3 triangles, space, 4 triangles, space, 2 triangles, space, 6 triangles, like that. It's a series of triangles coming through the telegraph machine. And one of the crew members, I think he's the chief officer, is looking at it. And the last scene is just a serious what the hell moment, which lets me know that we're going to get into some really weird territory here, like Lost level bullshit, kind of weird stories at the end. The last scene they cut back, and there's a wall on some cabin in the ship or an office or somewhere where all of the principal characters in the series so far, their images are being displayed on video monitors. In 1899, I don't know what's going on. That last scene is a serious WTF moment where we're supposed to be in 1899, but all of the principal characters' images are showing up on video monitors. Stay tuned for the spoiler-filled, unprofessional, unedited, one-take review of episode 3. Until then, take care.